Hi, I'm Layla. I've always considered myself just an ordinary girl trying to make ends meet while balancing my studies and a part-time job. I'm usually the type to avoid trouble and stick to my routine, but lately, life has been throwing some pretty wild curveballs my way. It all started on what seemed like a normal, boring day at the grocery store where I work. The air was chilly near the dairy section, and I could smell that faint, plastic scent of milk jugs as I was busy stacking them into the fridge. Suddenly, my coworker Camila came up to me looking all stressed out. She told me that I absolutely had to help her because she had a date scheduled for the next night, but she was too busy to go. Then she actually asked if I could go instead of her. I was completely caught off guard and felt a bit of a shock run through me. I asked her what she was talking about because I didn't even know who this person was. Plus, I reminded her that I already had a boyfriend named Lincoln, so the whole idea sounded crazy to me. Camila started explaining that it was all part of a dating service, and she promised me it was completely legitimate. She said the clients were mostly just lonely men who wanted someone to talk to for some company. She told me all I had to do was chat with them, and she made sure to mention there was a very strict policy against any hugging or kissing. The part that really surprised me was when she said they would pay me at the end of the night. Honestly, I just thought, no thanks. There was no way I was going to do something like that. But then things got worse after my shift ended. I walked home and felt my heart sink when I saw my landlady lingering right in my doorway, looking impatient. The moment she saw me, she started yelling at the top of her lungs, complaining that I still owed her 5 months of rent. She threatened me, saying that if I didn't have the money by the end of the week, she would kick me out on the street. I felt so desperate and tried to beg her for just a little more time, but it was pointless. She wouldn't listen to a single word I said. I went back to my room and just collapsed onto my bed, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulder. I was panicking and my mind was racing a mile a minute. I kept asking myself what I was supposed to do and where on earth I could find that much money on such short notice. The room felt smaller as I paced back and forth, looking at my empty bank account on my phone. Then Camilla's weird dating service popped into my head. I hesitated for a second, but honestly, it looked like I was completely out of choices. I couldn't end up homeless, so with a shaky hand, I picked up my phone and called her to say I'd do it. I told her I was in and that I'd go on the date for her. So there I was, getting ready for the weirdest night of my life. I stood in front of my mirror, staring at the most basic dress I could find in my closet, trying to look presentable, but not like I was trying too hard. My hands were shaking so much I could barely zip it up. I felt incredibly nervous since I had absolutely no idea what I was supposed to say, or how I was even supposed to act on a paid date. When I arrived at the restaurant, the smell of expensive steak and red wine filled the air, making me feel even more out of place. I looked around the dimly lit room and spotted a man sitting alone at a table. I thought to myself that it had to be him, but as I got closer, I nearly choked. My God, Camila, I couldn't believe she forgot to mention that this guy was in his 50s. I felt a flush of embarrassment creep up my neck because I just knew people would look at us and think he was my sugar dad. I had to tell myself to keep it together and stay calm. I knew I couldn't back out now since having a roof over my head depended on it. I slowly approached his table, feeling every eye in the room on me. At first, he looked really surprised, which made sense since he was expecting to see Camila's face, not mine. I nervously explained the whole situation to him, and to my relief, he wasn't mad at all. He just gave me a kind smile and we started chatting. I learned that his name was Mr. Hall. He told me he had lost his wife 2 years ago, and ever since then, he had been feeling so lonely that he just needed someone to talk to. That was why he started using the dating service in the first place. Honestly, he was actually pretty easy to talk to, and the night went by quickly without any awkward silences or problems. Once we were done, he handed me a thick envelope. He told me how grateful he was that I had taken the time to listen to all of his burdens. I was dying to just run home and see how much money was inside. But then he started talking about his heartbroken son. Out of nowhere, he asked if I would be willing to talk to his son too. I immediately told him no, as politely as I could, because I had only intended for this to be a one-time thing to help Camila. Besides, I kept thinking about Lincoln. My boyfriend would be so furious if he ever found out I was doing this. The next morning, I went straight to my landlady and handed her enough to cover 2 months' worth of rent. I felt a huge weight lift off my chest as I assured her I'd have the rest of the money for her very soon. But to my absolute shock, she didn't look happy at all. She just scowled at me and told me that I had to pay the entire balance all at once or I was out. I felt like I was right back at square one. I was desperate. With no other choice and the threat of being homeless looming over me, I had to swallow my pride. I called Mr. Hall again, took a deep breath, and told him I'd meet his son after all. So believe it or not, there I was in a cozy little cafe just a few days later. I was nervously tapping my fingers on the table while waiting for Mr. Hall and his son. I let out a long sigh, feeling a bit defeated by my own life. Then I saw Mr. Hall walking in with a younger guy. That had to be his son, Leon. I couldn't help but notice how annoyed he looked. His brows were furrowed, and he seemed like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. I tried to be polite, so I stood up and introduced myself, telling him it was nice to meet him. He didn't even try to be civil, he just told me to save the small talk. He made it very clear that he was only there because his father had forced him to, so he just wanted to get it over with as quickly as possible. Mr. Hall looked a bit embarrassed and thanked me for coming, then introduced him as Leon and asked me not to mind his son's terrible attitude. Once Mr. Hall left us alone, the silence was deafening. Man, Leon was such hard work. Every time I tried to ask him a question to get us talking, he just shrugged his shoulders or let out an annoyed snort. When he finally decided to open his mouth, it was only to be sarcastic. He asked me if the money was worth. I was stunned by how rude he was. Before I could even process that, he kept going, saying that I must be really desperate and asking if I felt any shame for what I was doing. I was boiling with anger because he was easily the rudest person I had ever met in my entire life. But inside, a part of me winced because he was right. I was desperately in need of money. I took a deep breath to calm my racing heart and just started telling him about my life. When the time was finally up, I said goodbye and practically ran out of there. I thought that unpleasant experience was the end of it. But I was so wrong. Mr. Hall called and asked me to meet Leon several more times. I wasn't in a position to argue since I still needed the cash to pay my bill. But Leon was truly getting on my nerve. Every time we met, he would just slouch in his seat, making loud slurping noises with his drink, and say absolutely nothing. Because of that, I had to do all the work. I ended up rambling about everything me past, my family, my friends, and even what I hoped for in the future. Leon just sat there, supposedly listening to it all. Luckily, it finally ended. Hall paid me, so I figured I would never have to see Leon again. Since I had been so busy with Miss Hall and Leon over the last few weeks, I realized I hadn't spent much quality time with Lincoln. I really missed him, so when the weekend rolled around, I invited him over to my place. I even spent the afternoon cooking a nice meal for him, hoping we could just have a normal, romantic night together. For the most part, our date night was just like how I planned it. After dinner, we curled up on my old comfy couch, hugging each other while some movie played in the background. It felt so nice to just breathe and be with him after all that stress. But then, the mood shifted. Lincoln's body went a bit stiff, and he said in this really serious tone that we needed to talk. I felt my stomach drop, wondering what could be wrong. Before he could say another word, my phone started buzzing loudly. I looked down and saw it was Mr. Hall. I panicked and quickly rushed out to the balcony, feeling the cool night air hit my face as I picked up. He told me he wanted me to be Leon's +1 at his eldest son's wedding, and the kicker was that he was willing to pay me double. I groaned internally because the idea sounded absolutely awful, especially after how Leon had treated me. But then I thought about my life besides that looming rent. I had college fees piling up and groceries to buy. My measly paycheck from the store barely covered anything. So with a heavy heart, I reluctantly told him I'd do it. When I walked back inside, the room felt a bit tense. I looked at Lincoln and asked him what it was he wanted to tell me earlier. He seemed to hesitate for a second before saying that he had to go away on a business trip for 2 weeks. In a weird way, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I thought that maybe this was for the best, since I could go to the wedding with Leon without having to worry about my boyfriend finding out and getting hurt. But then the guilt hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt so terrible keeping this from him. I promised myself right then and there that this would be the absolute last time I'd ever do something like this. The wedding day finally arrived, and I was already on edge. When Leon arrived to pick me up, he didn't even say hello. Instead, he just took one look at me and told me there was no way I could wear such an ugly dress to his brother's wedding. He was so rude. I told him straight out that I didn't have anything else suitable to wear, but he didn't care. He just told me to get in the car. He then drove me to this fancy dress boutique, the kind of place I'd usually be afraid to even walk into. Once we were inside, he told the staff to bring out the most beautiful dress they had for me to try on. When I walked out of the fitting room and looked in the mirror, I was honestly overwhelmed. The fabric felt so soft against my skin, and the dress was absolutely stunning. I had to admit, I looked amazing in it. Even Leon seemed to think so, because he just stood there, unable to take his eyes off me for a moment. I let out a sigh, feeling a bit sad because I knew there was no way I could afford something that expensive. But before I could even open my mouth to say we should leave, he just went ahead and paid for the whole thing. It was so frustrating because I didn't want to owe him anything, but at the same time, I was wearing the most beautiful thing I'd ever owned. So we finally got to the church. I sat there in the wooden pew, feeling the heavy floral scent of all those wedding flowers filling the room. Leon was already busy flirting with some girls nearby, and I couldn't help but roll my eye. Thank God Lincoln wasn't a jerk like him. Then the music started, everyone took their seats, and the ceremony began. I watched the groom walk down the aisle toward the altar, wearing this perfectly fitted suit. I was just thinking to myself how nice it must be to be that rich when my heart stopped. I looked closer and felt like the floor had opened up beneath me. It was Lincoln, my Lincoln. Our eyes met for a split second, and he looked just as terrified and shocked as I felt. But instead of stopping everything or running to me to explain why he was standing there as the groom, he just looked away. He ignored me and went right on with the wedding. I had to sit there, frozen, watching them say their vows and exchange rings. When they finally kissed, I honestly thought I was going to faint right then and there. I couldn't even breathe properly. Later at the reception, things got even worse. Leon dragged me over to where Lincoln was standing, and of all things, introduced me to him as his girlfriend. It was beyond awkward. I could hardly look either of them in the eye. Luckily, some pretty girl caught Leon's eye and he wandered off to talk to her, leaving us alone for a second. Lincoln immediately grabbed my arm and pulled me into a quiet stairwell. He whispered to me, sounding all accusatory, asking why I was there with his brother and if I had been cheating on him this whole time. I was so angry I could have screamed. I told him he had to be kidding me and reminded him that I wasn't the one who just got married. He kept begging me to let him explain and said that it wasn't what it looked like. But I just wasn't having. Right then, Leon popped back up and asked what we were doing talking in the stairs. I made up an excuse and muttered something about just trying to find the bathroom. I couldn't stay there a second longer, so I told Leon I had a terrible headache and asked him to take me home. When I went back to my place, my head was just spinning. The whole thing was so confusing and messy. I kept pacing around my living room, asking myself how on earth my perfect boyfriend could now be married to someone else. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with texts from him. He kept saying how much he wanted us to meet up and talk things over. I let out a long, heavy sigh looking at the screen. As much as I was hurting, I figured I at least needed to hear him out and get some real answers. The next day, I met Lincoln at the museum. It was the place where we had our very first date, so being there just made my heart ache even more. We stood there among the quiet exhibits as he finally opened up. He explained that his new wife, Sandra, is the daughter of this incredibly influential businessman who owns one of the biggest corporations in town. Apparently, Lincoln's family company was drowning in debt, and his dad had basically forced him to marry Sandra just to keep the business from going under. Lincoln looked at me so desperately and begged me to believe that he didn't have any feelings for her. He told me it was strictly business and that I was the only person he truly loved. He kept pleading with me not to leave him, promising that as soon as the company was back on track, he would file for a divorce and come back to me for good. I know. You probably think I'm totally crazy for even listening to him, but I realized I still loved him so much. I tried to justify it to myself. If the marriage was just a temporary sacrifice to save his family's legacy, then that made it okay, right? He gave me a quick kiss goodbye and left. But after that day, everything felt different. Lincoln completely changed. Every time I tried to text or call him, he'd brush me off, saying he was too busy and promising to call me back later. But he never did. I started to think that maybe his new married life was a lot more preoccupying than he'd let on. As if I wasn't already frustrated enough, I had to deal with Leon constantly showing up at my apartment and bothering me. One night, he even stumbled to my door completely drunk, rambling and complaining about his ex-girlfriend who had just married someone else. I just rolled my eyes at him, thinking his drama was nothing compared to the fact that my actual boyfriend was currently a married man. I tried my best to kick him out, but he was so far gone that he fell fast asleep right there on my couch. When I walked into the kitchen the next morning, I found Leon standing there, holding a framed photo of me and Lincoln. He looked at it, then back at me, asking why on earth we were in a picture together like that. I didn't see any point in hiding it, so I just shrugged and told him the truth that we were a couple. I expected shock, but Leon just started laughing right in my face. He called me a total fool, which made my blood boil. We ended up in a huge argument, shouting back and forth until I finally reached my limit and forced him to leave my apartment. Honestly, I didn't care how it looked to anyone else. I chose to believe in Lincoln. A few days later, I was just leaving my college campus when I spotted Mr. Hall waiting for me. He looked tired as he let out a slight sigh. He told me he was going to make it short and warned me to stay away from Lincoln because he was a married man now. He even said that while he was fond of me, he wouldn't hesitate to make things very complicated for me if I tried to mess with his son's marriage. I just stood there on the sidewalk, completely stunned, watching him drive away. My mind immediately went to Leon. I couldn't believe he had snitched on me like a giant baby. I was so angry that I grabbed my phone and called him right then to give him a piece of my mind. I told him he was such a jerk for running to his dad and told him to just leave us alone and mind his own business. Leon didn't even sound sorry. He told me that if I wanted to trust Lincoln, that was my choice. But he warned me that Lincoln wasn't as innocent as he seemed. He said both Lincoln and his dad would do absolutely anything for the sake of the company. I had no idea what that was supposed to mean, and I was too fed up to care. So I just hung up before he could say another word. The fact that Leon didn't even try to deny what he did made me even more furious. I wasn't going to let them tear us apart. I knew I had to fight for what Lincoln and I had. The very next day, I was so fueled by adrenaline that I walked straight into Mr. Hall's office, ignoring his secretary, who was desperately trying to block my path. I marched right up to his desk and told him to his face that I would never give up on Lincoln, no matter how much he tried to threaten me. I looked him in the eye and told him that forcing his own son into a marriage just to save a business made him a total coward. I expected him to be angry, but instead, Mr. Hall just burst out laughing. What he said next, though, wasn't funny at all. It felt like a punch to the gut. It turns out that marrying Sandra was actually Lincoln's idea. Leon had been right all along. Both of them were willing to do anything for that company. And to make matters worse, Leon hadn't snitched on me at all. Mr. Hall had seen us talking at the wedding and hired a private investigator to look into it. I realized right then that I had been completely wrong about Leon. Just as I was processing all of this, the door opened and Lincoln walked in. He stopped dead in his tracks the second he saw me. He stammered, asking what I was doing there, but I didn't let him finish. I called him exactly what he was, a liar, and told him I couldn't believe I had ever trusted him. He started begging me to hear him out, but I'd heard enough. I reached over, grabbed the iced coffee sitting on Miss Hall's desk, and splashed the whole thing right in Lincoln's lying face. I told him we were done, turned on my heel, and walked out of that office without looking back. Feeling like a massive fool, I rushed to the nearest bar, desperate to just drown my sorrows and forget everything. I was sitting at the sticky counter, about to down my 4th shot of tequila, when a hand reached out and stopped me. I snapped, thinking it was Lincoln again. I tried to push him away, shouting for him to just leave me alone, but when I finally looked up, it wasn't Lincoln at all. It was Leon. I completely broke down right there. My chest felt tight and I was sobbing hard. I just let it all out how I'd blamed him for everything, called him a snitch, and treated him like a jerk. I felt so ashamed of how I judged him that I told him he really should hate me. But Leon didn't get angry. He just looked at me with this quiet, sincere expression that made the rest of the room go silent. Then he told me very simply that he liked me. Hearing that made my heart drop. I just sat there, completely stunned, realizing that the person I had been pushing away was actually the only one looking out for me. The room felt like it was spinning. As we talked, everything slowly came to light, and the truth was even darker than I imagined. Leon had been devastated when his girlfriend broke up with him, but he eventually found out she did it just to be with his brother. And yeah, you guessed it, his ex-girlfriend was Sandra. At first, Miss Hall had actually tried to force Leon to marry her to save the company. Even though Leon was crazy about her, he refused to marry her under those cold business stipulations. But Lincoln had overheard the whole thing, and to gain his father's favor and control of the company, he intentionally charmed Sandra away from his own brother. I sat there in shock. My God, this family was absolutely insane. I realized right then that I didn't want anything to do with any of them ever again. I couldn't handle the drama, the lies, or the manipulation. I told Leon I couldn't return his feelings, so I ran straight out of that bar and blocked all of them immediately. I was done. 4 months have flown by, and honestly, so much has changed. I graduated last month, and the second I had that diploma in my hand, I knew I needed a fresh start in a shiny new city. So far, life has been great. I have a new job that I absolutely adore, and it's such a relief to wake up every morning knowing I'm not going to run into that jerk Lincoln or his manipulative father. But I know what you're wondering. What about Leon? Well, just the other day, I was walking out of my new apartment when I saw a very familiar face. Yes, it was him. It turns out that when Leon heard I was moving away, he decided to pack up and move too. I was actually touched that he was willing to leave his family, his friend, and his job behind just to be near me. After everything that happened, I think maybe it's finally time to start opening up to him, don't you? Well, I guess only time will tell. It's a shame my story has to end here, but I'm finally looking forward to the future.